Everyone wants to know the best fishing spot or best fish pond. What I want to know is, what's the worst fish in the game that has absolutely no redeeming qualities? To find that answer, I need to define what useful fishy traits exist in the first place. Let's break it down. Starting with the most obvious trait, value. Fish have wildly different price tags, ranging from 30 to 5,000 gold. Fishing is a good moneymaker at any stage of the game, and knowing the value of each fish is important for maximizing profits. My candidate for worst fish will likely be much less valuable than the other fish available to you at the time. Speaking of, the second trait is availability. Fish have various restrictions on when you can hook them, changing based on the seasons, weather conditions, or even the time of day. For an extreme example of poor availability, blobfish are unusually quite valuable compared to almost all other non-legendary fish, but they're only available for a very brief window specifically at night on Winter 15 through Winter 17 during the night market submarine ride. Poor availability covers more than just seasonal, locational, and weather restrictions. It also includes the concept of rarity. Your average fish is roughly as common as any other fish in the same zone, but a few specific outliers have low to very low bite rates, and don't play nice with targeted bait, which in normal circumstances makes your target fish extremely likely to bite. I don't know if availability will influence my choice for worst fish, but I'll keep it in mind for every fish I evaluate. The third trait is difficulty. Some fish are incredibly difficult to catch consistently, or at all at low fishing levels or with poor fishing gear. Even at max fishing level, some fish are still so difficult to catch you need to bring special equipment to be sure that you can get the job done. This comes at an opportunity cost. Using something like a trap bobber to land difficult fish means that equipment slot wasn't used on something else like a quality bobber to massively increase the value of your catch. But there's much more to difficulty than just catch or fail, because fish difficulty has huge implications regarding the perfect catch mechanic, which rewards you if the fish never leaves the bounds of your fishing bar during the entire fishing minigame. Perfect catches increase the quality of your catch, which means a lot more money, but easily overlooked and very important, a perfect catch also secretly grants a huge 2.4 times bonus to experience gained. This matters a lot, because reaching level 10 fishing is critically important to make fishing easier and increase the sale price of your catch. Since high difficulty can be a huge detriment, I'll consider the idea that my candidate for worst fish might be one of those fish that just aren't worth the trouble. The fourth trait is utility, an umbrella catch-all for all other miscellaneous use cases. As examples, a few fish make for excellent gifts, some restore plenty of health and energy when eaten, and many fish are used as ingredients for specific recipes. Since any fish can be used to prepare sashimi, there's a certain baseline minimum utility for all fish where they can at least be turned into a decent snack if they're otherwise completely lacking in value. Our final trait comes down to how good a given fish is when placed into a fish pond. I need an actual name for this one. Pond potential? Pond value? Pondability? The pond value of a fish is measured by what loot that specific fish pond generates, which usually means fish roe, the sale price of which is determined by the value of the parent fish, but the quantity of roe produced and the frequency of production can vary on a case-by-case basis. There's also a lot more going on here, since some fish have a chance to grant you items besides roe, which range wildly from good to terrible, as well as common to quite rare. Many conventionally high-value fish also make good pond fish in turn because their roe is worth a lot of money, but being able to generate interesting items might be enough to save otherwise mediocre fish by giving them a solid use case. Since most fish ponds are generally not worth the money, time, and effort required to get them set up, I'll only mention this category for fish where it actually makes a difference and it might be worth setting up a pond for them. With all of this in mind, if I'm going to determine the worst fish, I need to go through all 72 fish listed in the fish collection one by one and evaluate if they're good for anything or not. I'll dive right in, starting with fish caught in the river during spring. Sunfish. Known to appear sometimes as your first ever catch due to the tutorial mechanics no matter where you fish, which can be pretty funny if you do it on purpose, but you can only do it if you've never caught a fish before. Sunfish are extremely low in value, tying for the lowest value fish at 30 gold. Absolute rock bottom. While sunfish seem quite bad, they are one of the easiest fish to catch in the game and can serve as an effective tutorial fish for earning experience at low fishing levels by making it very simple to land a perfect catch for the 2.4 times experience boost. Sunfish are limited to sunny days, which gives you some control over whether you want to see them or not, which is actually a big plus. You don't want to see them at all if you're fishing for money, but they have the sensible behavior of staying home when you fish on rainy days, helping you target the much more valuable catfish. Sunfish have a unique recipe, but it's pretty terrible. Instead, just make sashimi twice. Don't make baked fish. Smallmouth bass are like better sunfish. They're ridiculously easy to catch, worth more money, although still not very much, and restore far more energy, making them very cost-effective early game snacks before you have access to cooking. That helps make up for their low value, so they're genuinely decent fish for what they are. Goby. A very specific fish lumped in the river category for lack of a better home. You can only catch these suckers at the bottom of the waterfalls on the forest cliffside, and they're surprisingly impractical, despite a seemingly good base value of 150 gold. Those tiny little ponds gobies call home are very small, which is bad. The quality of fish you reel in depends heavily on not just your fishing level, but also the distance from land. Anything you catch down there in the shallow water will be notably lower quality, reducing your sales, energy restoration, and experience gains. Still, they are worth a lot of money, so is it worth it? Surprisingly, no, not really. The other big problem with gobies is that they're somewhat rare. The chance to hook a goby is 15%, no matter how many other fish are available during your current conditions, and they don't play nice with targeted bait, ranging between 36% to 42% bite rates. That's very low when it comes to the power of the baitmaker's targeted bait. For a comparison, if you targeted something more common in the area like chubs, you get a bite 86 to 99% of the time. As a rare fish, they do have an interaction with the curiosity lure, which makes rare fish more common, bringing the base bite rate from 15% to 30%. Is this the silver bullet that makes gobies worth fishing? Again, no, don't do this. Curiosity lures are not easy to come by since they can't be crafted or purchased and must be found as a rare drop. Since fishing tackle degrades quickly, you're going to get maybe 3 extra gobies for the trouble before your rare lure is gone forever. If you're trying to fish for profit, you're really better off doing something else. Ultimately, gobies aren't very good, but it's fascinating how many unique and quirky traits they have beyond their very specific fishing zone and their rarity. Bonus fun fact, they're also inedible raw and subtract energy when consumed. Hilariously, cooking a goby by preparing raw sashimi somehow makes it fine to eat. Since poisonous food in Stardew subtracts energy, this fish was probably based off of the poison goby in real life, which can be the same color as Stardew's goby. The waterfall climbing behavior cited in-game, though, actually belongs to the Nopili rock climbing goby, which can scale wet vertical surfaces with a sucker on its belly. Stardew's goby appears to be inspired by both of these species. Chub. These replace smallmouth bass when fishing in the forest side of the river compared to the town side, and are very similar in terms of money and energy restoration, but they're much harder the perfect catch since they have the jerky or dart movement pattern, making them definitely worse. Catfish. This fish single-handedly carries basically every challenge run video on my channel. I would marry a catfish if I could. I probably caught more catfish than 99.9% of players. What's the reason for my catfish obsession? At 200 gold, they're at least twice as valuable as any other common spring fish, scaling very well with quality and fishing level professions, and that high sale price makes it viable to spend money purchasing coal to process them into smoked catfish for huge profits. If you're regularly fishing for high value fish, do everything you can to get your hands on some fish smokers. Catfish are also common enough to where they almost always bite when using targeted bait, so the method is extremely consistent and makes more steady cash than most other fish in the game. Their main downside is that you can only catch them on rainy days, and you might only get a few of those per season. However, catfish have better availability than you might think. Their primary seasons are spring and fall, but they're available year-round in the secret woods, even during winter if you force rain with a rain totem, which is a good backup even though the water's a bit shallow. Thankfully, it's just deep enough to where you're still able to land plenty of gold star fish once you hit level 10 fishing, but you're out of luck at lower levels. Speaking of levels, catfish are very difficult to catch at low fishing levels. I can personally catch more or less every single catfish at level 10 fishing without any extra gear, but they're just difficult enough to act as a gatekeeper for people with lower fishing levels or less practice fishing. It's also quite difficult to get a perfect catch when fishing catfish. I do get it occasionally without any special equipment, but maybe 10% of the time at best, which makes catfish surprisingly much worse for gaining fishing experience than easier fish you can reliably perfect. You can also catch these bad boys in the Witch's Swamp, which is basically guaranteed if targeted bait and even works off-season, which would arguably be the best way to fish catfish, but I've never bothered doing this since by the time I have access to this zone, I'm itching to move on to Ginger Island and fish there for better money. Shad, a rainy day fish that isn't worth much money, but they are remarkably very good for earning fishing experience since their buttery smooth movement pattern avoids sharp jerky motions and makes them quite easy to perfect catch. That being said, they're really not that good compared to the bullhead, which shares all of their positive traits while being worth more money and with drastically better availability, as they're not limited by weather, time, or season the way shads are. Bream. These guys are basically nighttime sunfish. Easy, low value, and they even share the same terrible recipe. Outside of low-level fishing training, these guys are kind of bad and mostly just get in the way. So far, the worst fish I've talked about is probably sunfish since it's worth almost no money and is outperformed in the low-level training niche by other easy fish that make for better sales or better snacks. Moving on to more fish, I suppose I'll stay here at the river but turn the clock to summer. Catfish and smallmouth bass are gone for now, but there's 3 new fish to cover. Rainbow trout, a summer exclusive fish with low value, but they've got a few interesting things going on. They're the star of the show during the Trout Derby mini festival, which makes them freely available despite weather and time restrictions, and rewards a bunch of extra little goodies for participating. Nothing insanely groundbreaking, but the hat and furniture items are exclusive to the Derby, and the other rewards do add value to fishing trout. Definitely bring a bait maker, and use targeted bait for rainbow trout if you plan to participate. I'll start mentioning when fish do something unique and interesting in a fish pond besides producing roe. We're quickly going to learn that unique does not mean good. Trout almost exclusively produce low-value roe, which would take ages to pay off the cost of putting up that fish pond. The quest requirements to max the population count to 10 can be surprisingly annoying. Your reward for doing this is an insultingly low chance at getting a rainbow shell in place of roe, which does sell for more money, but you'll easily go a month or two, maybe longer without seeing one, so it's kind of pointless. There's also an unthinkably low chance of getting a prismatic shard from your fish pond. Look me in the eye, right now. Do not do this. At a rate of 1 in 1,000, you could play 10 years in-game, and still not see a single prismatic shard. I mean, someone out there will get lucky and get one right away, but don't bet on it happening to you. Statistics show it's almost certain to be a waste of time and money to set up a fish pond for rainbow trout. Side note, you can also use these guys to cook trout soup, which is better than cooking sashimi, but the recipe isn't so good I'd go out of my way to make it unless I already happen to have the stuff on hand. Pike. Moderate value, moderately annoying difficulty since they're a dartfish, and high availability. There are plenty of other fish out there that are worth more gold, particularly in summer, or are just easier to catch. I'm not a big fan of pike. Dorado. Sometimes I ask myself, what if pike were worse? And also orange. Dorado are one of those fish that are too difficult for what they're worth. If you're good enough to handle fish around 80 difficulty, there are several vastly more appealing options available elsewhere during summertime that will earn you at least twice as much gold. They don't have good availability either, since they're only around in summer and vanish in the evenings. Dorado are at a high enough level of difficulty to be flirting with the concept of needing better gear to handle them comfortably. Even if you can catch them without ever failing, it really isn't fun to struggle the whole time, and using extra equipment does lower your profit. I think Dorado are genuinely kind of bad, given their high difficulty and insufficient reward. I'm going to move on to fall and winter to cover more fish before I circle back and think about my candidates for worst fish. Fall means all the summer fish are gone from the river, catfish and smallmouth bass are back, as well as 3 new fish. Salmon. A fairly forgettable fall exclusive fish with medium-low value and difficulty, that only stands out as an ingredient for salmon dinner, a complicated recipe where the final product is worth less money and restores less energy than the ingredients used to make it. Yeah, a lot of cooking in this game kinda sucks. High effort, and you actually lose out on resources for bothering to go through with it. Salmon dinner's only use case is that it's one of Alex's loved gifts, and he's quite picky, and you don't have very many options to begin with. If you really like Alex and want to prepare his favorite meals, go have fun. But if you don't care that much about it, try finding some universally liked or loved gifts for him. My go-to is iridium quality smoked fish, which isn't far behind a no quality loved gift. Salmon is my favorite fish in real life, so you can consider salmon dinner to be one of my love gifts as well. Tiger trout. What if pike were good? Actually, decent value aside, that's not even slightly the most interesting thing about tigers, since they have really strange fish pond behavior. They're based off the real-life tiger trout, a sterile hybrid of two different trout species that can reproduce, but their combined offspring cannot. As a result, Stardew's tiger trout is the only fish that does not reproduce over time and increase their number in a fish pond. That sounds like a detriment, like they're missing something every other fish has, but it's secretly useful. Normal fish force you to do quests in order to unlock their max population, and quests are given when fish try to reproduce when at their current population cap. Tiger trout don't reproduce, so they get to entirely skip quests. That's really convenient, because fish pond loot often kind of sucks before hitting max population, and tiger trout can get to 10 population faster than any other fish. Just throw in 10 tiger trouts and you're good to go. So that fish pond behavior is unique, but is that actually worth it? Tiger trout roe is worth some money, but surely far less than the more valuable fish. It turns out that tiger trout, while definitely not even close to the best option, are more viable than I initially thought because they almost always produce multiple roe each day instead of just one. The math works out that if you have the artisan profession and age your roe in jars, you're looking at an average of 600 gold per day from each tiger trout pond. That's much less money than the premier fish pond fish. Legendary fish average around 1600 or so each day, blobfish can do 1300, sturgeon and lava eel break 1000, but tiger trout are far easier and quicker to get set up than non-legendary fish, thanks to skipping quests. For example, sturgeon, blobfish, and lava take weeks of waiting to get through their 4 quests, even in the best circumstances. Sturgeon quests require nautilus shells from winter, making them hard to rush early on. You can't get your first blobfish until very late in the year, and their limited availability and rarity make them hard to find in bulk for filling ponds. Lava eel are super rare before unlocking Ginger Island, and take unusually long to reproduce, with quests some might find challenging. A humble working man's tiger trout might make half the gold of his betters, but there is something to be said about a pond that can be maxed out in a single day. I don't personally consider this good enough to be worth it, I only really bother with legendary fish, but given that most fish have really crappy fish ponds not worth mentioning, I was very surprised to find an under-the-radar fish that someone might want to try. I've gone on a long tangent about a fringe viable fish when I was supposed to be looking for bad ones. Let's move on, where was I? Walleye. Their value isn't bad, considering how incredibly easy they are to catch, even perfect catches, but they're kind of restrictive. They've got very poor availability, as they don't appear in the morning and are limited to rainy days in fall, and technically winter if you force rain. This is the kind of fish that you catch one of for the night fishing bundle and then forget about. Winter ditches half the fish, saying bye to shad, catfish, smallmouth bass, and salmon, but brings back pike and 2 new fish. Perch. Low difficulty and low value, they're kind of forgettable. You probably aren't relying on super easy fish for experience or snacks a year or later into your save file. It makes them feel very outclassed, they don't really do anything, and searching the river for easy fish will backfire the moment you encounter the terror of freshwater fish. Lingcod. This fish is an uncomfortable surprise to find on your rod. At a difficulty of 85, it's the most difficult fish we've covered so far, and will easily obliterate the casual fisher, leaving them dazed and confused at why a random river fish felt like a boss encounter. So are they valuable enough to justify their high difficulty? No, not really. Not at all, actually. I mentioned it briefly when covering Dorado, but we need to talk about what it means to gear up to consistently deal with difficult fish like lingcod. The most impactful tool in the arsenal is the trap bobber, which makes fish escape much slower when they aren't inside of the fishing bar. You'll need an iridium rod to use tackle like trap bobbers, and all forms of tackle quickly degrade with use and take up a full inventory slot for each spare, which can be annoying to deal with. The other main tackle for reducing difficulty is the cork bobber, which widens the fishing bar, which makes perfect catches much easier, but I'd really recommend the trap bobber when you're fighting for your life. Basically, lingcod are difficult enough to where you really want to pay for specialized gear so they don't slip off the line, but they don't sell for enough money to make you feel like you're getting your money's worth compared to other difficult fish. You'd be much happier hooking a winter sturgeon, making over 50% more gold for less effort. Lingcod feel like less of an opportunity and more like an infestation. Their high availability in winter at all times of day in both the river and mountains makes me feel like I'm getting randomly attacked by strong monsters with poor loot. God forbid you encounter these before reaching a high fishing level. I can handle them fine with a trap bobber, but but I'd rather use my tackle slot on something else, so my message to Lingcod is, please leave and don't come back. That's everything from the river, so my current thoughts are that Sunfish, Dorado, and Lingcod are on my naughty list and won't be getting presents this year. Should you fish in the river? Yes when catfish, not really during summer, beach is better, and maybe just run away in winter. I still have a lot of fish to get through. Let's check out a small area next, before I end up on another big one. We're going to the mines. Mines fish are quite interesting, high value, and available at any time, season, or weather conditions, but they're quite rare and only appear on specific floors. You actually catch a lot of algae and trash in the mines, which really hurts the potential experience and money from fishing. Ghost fish. Available on floors 20 and 60 and are the only common fish in the mines. But unfortunately they're worth almost no gold, given all the algae you had to sift through to get one. Their low value and poor fishing areas would easily make them one of the worst fish in the game, if not for one saving grace. Ghost fish are really delicious. Iridium quality ghost fish restore 100 energy when eaten. That's roughly equivalent to 200 gold worth of energy if you were to buy cheap food from Gus. I guess they're not useless after all. Stonefish, exclusive to floor 20 and highly valuable, but way too rare to be a consistent source of income. Stonefish bait only kind of works. You're probably going to lose money on it without an enchanted rod if you're sacrificing stonefish to make stonefish bait. Curiosity lures have an effect here, but a 5% bonus means you're probably going to catch literally one extra stonefish before your lure explodes, so, like, whatever. All that being said, most highly valuable fish also have high difficulty values to match, and stonefish are surprisingly not that difficult, with a medium value of 65. Stonefish are still much too rare to make chasing them down consistently good for making money. You should probably catch one for the collection and move on. If you're into this sort of thing, stonefish have a wide list of wacky, mining-themed fish pond items they can spit out, but not frequently enough to be groundbreaking, and they kinda produce nothing a good third of the time. They're notably much worse for ponds than the next two fish. Ice Pip. Exclusive to floor 60, and worth a lot of money, tying for the second most valuable non-legendary fish. Ice Pips are a little more rare than the stonefish, and are considerably more difficult, so you probably need a little help catching these. I've discussed the trap bobber previously, but I personally use deluxe bait if I need to catch an ice pip. I'm not using my usual targeted bait here since it's not worth it, and deluxe bait slightly widens the fishing bar, which is equivalent to a boost of 1.5 fishing levels, a small advantage but enough to make a difference. Anyway, don't expect to ever get a perfect catch on one of these. They can be a struggle to catch, but at least they're rewarding enough to where it's worth the effort when you do. Their fish pond is super similar to the stonefish pond, but notably better since the rare is more valuable and iron ore is worth more than copper. That being said, both of these fish feel like vastly inferior lava eel, so you may as well just hold out for those. Lava eel. This is the most valuable non-legendary fish in the game, at a staggering 700 gold, and is the most consistent way to fish for money, breaking 300k gold per day with ideal setups. You won't get anything like that from the mines, of course. Lava eels bite 5.4% of the time down there, which means that despite their incredible value, it's only worth fishing down here if you also happen to be hunting for cave jelly at the same time, which is twice as plentiful on floor 100 compared to 20 or 60. What makes lava eels stand miles and miles above the competition when it comes to profit fishing is the Ginger Island volcano. Fishing up there on the caldera nets you a 50% rate on lava eel, which jumps to more or less 100% when you use targeted bait. Since lava eels are roughly 3 times as valuable as other fish I normally consider to be high value, you can imagine how good the profit is if you reel in dozens of these per day. And I use them to help gather 10 million gold for perfection in one of my earlier videos. Lava eels, however, are the second most difficult non-legendary fish, and you need to overcome that if you want to make money off these bad boys. A trap bobber is a must, but even with that, they're still pretty annoying even for well-practiced fishers. Consider investing in the food that buffs your fishing level. Plus free food considerably widens the fishing bar and takes the edge off the difficulty. There are several options for food. Seafoam pudding has a huge plus 4 fishing buff, but I don't think it's actually the best option, since the buff duration is extremely short. Even though the game timer is supposedly paused during the fishing minigame, your food timers still run down, so it can take a lot of food to make it through the day. Instead, I'd recommend looking into lobster bisque or fish stew if you're gonna fish lava eel in bulk. Their duration is about 4 to 5 times as long as seafoam puddings, and while you do get less bonus fishing levels, it's still pretty good. Lobster bisque is a really simple recipe, but lobsters are pretty rare from marine crab pots, so you need dozens and dozens of pots to get lobsters in bulk. Fish stew is a much more complicated recipe, but all the seafood is genuinely pretty common, and you can get dozens of free mussels on the Ginger Island beach, so I'd recommend cooking stew in large batches if you're serious about regularly tackling the game's most difficult fish for money. Add cheese seasoning if you've got it, that'll increase both the fishing buff and the buff duration. At level 10 fishing and farming, you can get over 4k gold per smoked lava eel. Just bring smokers to the volcano and prep them as you go. But you can make even more money, since iridium quality smoked eels are worth almost 6,000 gold. But how do you get iridium quality eels anyway? It's not like you're gonna perfect catch your lava eels. The quality bobber can guarantee top quality eels for a huge profit boost, but it's difficult to use it in place of a trap bobber, so I recommend checking it out once you claim fishing mastery and pick up the advanced iridium rod, which has 2 tackle slots. You should also enchant your rod with preserving to halve the rate at which bait and tackle get consumed, since shoving lava eel into the bait maker means losing money. Lava eels also have one of the best fish ponds among the non-legendary fish, also one of the most red. Their roe is worth over 1k when aged, and they have some other interesting items that can pop up occasionally. Cave jelly is quite useful for crafting fish smokers. Spicy eel makes great buff food, and the free orange geodes aren't half bad. Since we're entering the territory of actually good fish ponds, you should know that golden animal crackers permanently double the output of the fish pond you chuck it into, and you can get those occasionally once you claim farming mastery. If this was a best fish video, the video would be roughly 5 seconds in length, and all I'd say is, it's lava eel, while staring into the camera for the next few seconds before abruptly cutting to black. Lava eels make several times more money than any other non-legendary fish. They're available 24/7 once you reach Ginger Island, and they even have a pretty decent fish pond. It's more than worth finding a way to deal with their high difficulty. Anyway, I really need to move on and cover some more fish, so let's do the ocean next. Starting with spring. Anchovies. This might be the worst fish to ever do it. It's valued at 30 gold, which joins the ranks of sunfish at the very, very bottom. But they're also not as good as a tutorial fish for low-level fishing because their behavior is set to dart, which is the jerky, erratic movement pattern that more easily slips out of the perfect catch range, making it slower to get those early fishing levels. I regularly spend half of my first fishing day on the beach to maintain proximity to Willie's shop, and I hate seeing these guys. Herring. Nearly identical to anchovies, but slightly lower difficulty. They're a hair better than anchovies since they're easier to perfect at level 0, but having a second bad fish floating around clogging up the list of potential hooks heavily devalues the beach during spring. Sardine. Still low value, but far better than herring and anchovies. They sell for more gold, and you can use them to cook Dish of the Sea, which is the earliest accessible fishing food in the game due to its very simple unlock requirement of level 3 fishing. If you need to catch a difficult fish early on, like a legendary fish, or even a sturgeon or pufferfish for the community center bundles, popping a plus free food can make that job a lot easier. Flounder. Finally something good from the ocean. A value of 100 gold is pretty high for a fish that's still pretty easy to catch. They're also used to cook seafoam pudding, which does grant the most fishing levels out of all food, even if it's a bit short. Pudding is the best you can get when you need to break out the big guns to help you land a tough legendary fish. The main issue with flounder is they tend to bite way less than other fish. Even targeted bait only works half the time. That's kind of a shame. If you put flounder in a fish pond, you'll eventually get sea jelly, but this is a pretty terrible trade, since you need to spend a sea jelly on the quest to get them set up. Halibut. 80 gold is a decent value for a fairly easy fish, but it does disappear for 8 hours in the middle of the day. Kind of an unexceptional fish overall. Eel. Not the lava variety, just the regular, wet kind. Fairly restrictive, since they only appear during rainy evenings, but they're notably easier to catch than their 70 difficulty suggests because they have a very smooth movement pattern. What makes eel interesting is not their sale value, but that they have 2 unique recipes, the fried eel and spicy eel. Luck boosts are useful when mining to reveal more ladders underneath rocks, and also help you find jellies when fishing. Speed boosts are extremely useful for doing just about anything that involves walking around, but particularly good for mining when paired with the luck buff. I'd normally say that cooking your own spicy eel is a waste of time because you can trade rubies to the desert merchant for spicy eel and buy them by the dozen, but it might arguably be worth cooking it yourself with cheese seasoning to increase the length of the buff timer and the potency of the luck buff. That's all the spring ocean fish. Anchovy is definitely in the bad fish bucket right now. The ocean is lousy with low value fish in spring, But summer is a different beast, since those cheap sardine, herring, and anchovies get swapped out for new fish. Pufferfish, a difficult fish but a rewarding one, held back by its poor availability, only appearing during a narrow 4-hour window on sunny summer days. They'd be quite profitable if you had more time to catch them. Fun fact, pufferfish are poisonous, and you actually lose energy when eating them. Surprisingly, pufferfish sashimi, known in Japan as fugu, is actually served in restaurants in East Asia despite pufferfish organs containing a lethal dose of neurotoxin. You could die if they don't prepare it correctly. Imagine ordering that and it doesn't even taste good. If you want to have a little fun, you can poison the governor at the luau by throwing pufferfish into the communal soup, but you will lose 100 points of friendship with all the villagers for attempting homicide. Tuna. Like eels, they're definitely easier to catch than their difficulty suggests because they move so smoothly, but they're not easy to perfect because they can still jump pretty far up or down in one swoop. Moderate value, and they have a unique recipe, the fish taco. The fish taco kind of sucks. Despite the fact that it ties for the most valuable meal in the game, even using low quality ingredients is much more expensive than the final product. A lot of cooking in the game is like this, and I have no idea why. Fish tacos do provide a moderate fishing buff, but it's worse than better food that's also easier to make. It's mildly ridiculous that tacos require those elusive Year 2 red cabbages. Fish tacos are one of Caroline's favorite gifts, but instead of cooking such a complicated and expensive recipe, you could just grow her a flower. It's cheap and gives more friendship if it's high quality. Gus also loves fish tacos, but it's easier to plant an orange tree. Don't cook fish tacos. Tuna's kind of mid. They also don't bite very frequently, similar to flounder, so if you were target fishing these, you get really inconsistent results. Red mullet. Low medium value and difficulty. I love smooth movement pattern fish. These guys might be really good for fishing training from the mid-high levels toward level 10. Their difficulty is 55, so their base EXP value is solid, but they're just easy enough to consistently perfect thanks to their smooth movement pattern. They're in sort of a Goldilocks zone for experience. Anything harder means way less experience from losing out on perfects, and anything easier grants less base experience. My favorite training fish is probably still the bullhead, which has perfect availability in all seasons and conditions and is slightly easier, but I think red mullets are a great choice to target if you want to push for level 10 fishing. And while they do stop showing at 7 PM, if you're feeling bold, you could swap to those nighttime super cucumbers for profit fishing. Speaking of super cucumbers, at 250 gold, they're worth more money than basically any other fish that isn't legendary or otherwise rare. They're difficult to catch, but worth the effort since they're so valuable. They only appear at night, however, so you only get 8 hours each day to try and catch them, and they don't always bite either. You can still make good money on these if you can deal with their difficulty and uncommon nature, but those problems make them a little worse than their high value otherwise suggests. Putting super cucumbers into a fish pond will turn it purple, which is fun. The actual income from a purple pond is okay, but much lower than the real high value producers out there, and the gimmick of getting iridium ore occasionally is interesting and unique, but very inconsistent, only occurring 5% of the time. So you need like a dozen of these ponds running at max capacity to get enough iridium to do anything with, which I don't personally recommend unless you've completely sworn off the skull caverns. The wizard loves super cucumbers if you want to save him a high quality birthday gift, but purple mushrooms also do the trick, and there's way cheaper gifts if you don't care about quality. Red snapper. Low difficulty and low value, and it's kind of restrictive because you can only find it on rainy days. An unexciting fish you catch one of for the ocean fish bundle. Tilapia. An honestly kind of forgettable morning fish that doesn't stand out too much, but you do need to grab one for a bundle. While I personally can't think of anything to say about tilapia, someone got so heated about tilapia being miscategorized as a saltwater fish in Stardew Valley when they're a freshwater fish in real life that they made an entire mod just to remove tilapia from the ocean and the ocean fish bundle, moving it to the river instead. I didn't know someone cared enough about tilapia to do that. I can respect it. Octopus. This thing is a demon, featuring an unreasonable 95 difficulty. Hooking this fish is legitimately a jump scare the way it furiously darts across the entire fishing minigame at light speed before escaping. Octopus is the hardest non-legendary fish, and it's actually harder than some legendary fish, with only glacier fish and legends exceeding its difficulty. If you need to catch an octopus, say for your collection log, you should really bring a trap bobber and eat some good food. I wouldn't recommend trying to catch octopus for profit. 150 gold is comfortably above average in value, but they're somewhat rare and bite way less often than any other ocean fish. Plus, you'll probably fail to catch when you finally do hook one if you aren't very well prepared. They also only show up in the morning, so their overall availability is pretty bad. The extreme difficulty of the octopus makes it universally hated, and they're largely unrewarding in comparison to their difficulty if you go for the effort to chase them down. Willy has them as a loved gift, but please consider anything else. There's no shortage of options. If you put an octopus in a fish pond, they sometimes spit out omnigeodes, and I'm not sure why. Either way, it's not common enough to really be worth your time. I think octopus has to go in the bad fish bucket. Poor availability, extreme difficulty, and a sale value that just doesn't scale properly to match all the issues involved in actually catching one of these. Other high difficulty fish can make way more money than octopus. That finally covers the summer ocean. Overall, there's several high value fish like puffers and super cucumbers, and honestly, none of the fish besides easily avoidable red snappers are particularly low value. Moving the season to fall swaps out over half the fish and brings back fish we don't want like anchovies, but is there anything new to cover? Sea cucumber, the little cousin of the super cucumber. Its value is pretty decent for such an incredibly easy fish, and it's got a lot of utility. Willy has these as a loved gift, and it's super easy to catch iridium quality cucumbers for him. They're also used to cook Lucky Lunch, which carries an enormous plus-free buff to luck. That's useful for a few things. Bonus luck massively increases the rate at which you find jellies if you need any of those, and luck is a huge boost to finding ladders underneath rocks when mining. Albacore, a moderate difficulty fish without any exciting traits. It's not particularly good or bad enough to be memorable in any capacity, but I have a huge soft spot for albacore, because it's the tuna species famously used for canned tuna, and it's one of my favorite things to eat for lunch. They should add mercury poisoning in the Stardew Valley for added realism. Not a lot of new ocean fish in fall, so I need to move on to winter where there's one new fish, squid. Squid are somewhat difficult, comparable to catfish, and they're not worth that much money for something you're probably not getting any perfect catches on. You can also only find them at night. Thankfully, they're interesting for other purposes. The most obvious is Squid Fest, a winter mini-festival similar to the Trout Derby, which has a list of rewards including a piece of furniture, a hat, and a book that can only be found here. Squid are also used to cook fried calamari, which stands out as one of the very few loved gift options for Pierre, and it's not too hard to cook since you can just buy the flour and oil. Squid also have a different style of fish pond, and I wish way more ponds used this formula. Squid don't produce roe at all. Instead, they only produce their signature item, squid ink, an ingredient for seafoam puddings. Since most fish don't produce valuable enough roe to make the whole pond thing worth doing, it's fun to see a fish that abandons roe entirely to always produce a different item instead. Way too many fish have a sub 10% chance to produce their specialty. Who cares if sunfish have an 8% chance to produce one solar essence? I'm not sure whether these next fish count as ocean fish or not, but you do have to head to the beach in winter to find the Night Market Submarine Ride. Available for free days over the 15th through 17th. The fish here are tempting, but have terrible availability since they're limited to 3 nights of the whole year. Midnight Squid, the least valuable submarine fish. Snagging one mostly means you wish you caught one of the other two. It's got the same squid ink filled fish pond as the normal squid. Spookfish. They're more valuable than most other fish and aren't even difficult to catch, which sounds like a great little moneymaker, but they're not only limited to the submarine ride, they're not even common. Targeted bait doesn't even work that well. They're too limited and too rare to be a particularly good fish despite their advantageous traits. Blobfish. Now we're talking. They have the second highest value of all non-legendary fish, only falling short of the tyrannical lava eel. They're not easy to catch, but not so hard to need extra gear to get by. Unfortunately, they're obnoxiously rare when you only have 3 chances to catch them each year. What makes blobfish good is that they have the most lucrative fish pond among all non-legendary fish. While the value of their roe falls short of something like lava eel, blobfish are quite likely to produce multiple roe per day, which is a ton of extra profit. They're not quite as lucrative as legendary fish ponds, and they do take a long time to ramp up past all 4 quests to full production, but if you really like building ponds, blobfish are the way to make money if you don't have any legendaries to throw in. That's all the fish from the ocean, minus crimson fish, which I'll return to when I cover all the legendaries. Anchovy and octopus got the worst of it, although for very different reasons. I'll keep those two in mind, I might be coming back to them if I can't find anything worse. The mountain lake is a freshwater fishing zone with a lot of overlap with the river fish, so I only have 5 new fish to cover. Largemouth bass. These guys really stand out in spring, which is extremely sparse when it comes to high-value fish outside of rainy days. Bass are the highest value option after catfish and aren't even difficult to catch, making them your single best option for money making when fishing on a sunny spring day. They can also be used to cook crispy bass, which would be a completely useless waste of money, except Jody happens to love them. That being said, it's way easier to make pancakes for her. Bullhead. Smooth movement makes perfect catches a breeze. For money, they're the ideal fish for spring evenings once bass leave at 7 PM, and they're my single favorite fish in the game for optimizing experience gains. Available literally 24/7 across all seasons, very easy to perfect catch at a wide range of levels, while having a high enough base experience to grant buckets of it for each one you hook. This is a good fish, and I've relied on them to help speedrun level 10 fishing in my challenge videos. Carp. Famous for doing literally nothing during the fishing minigame. The easiest fish in the game by a huge margin. You can catch them without even moving the fishing bar. Carp tie for the lowest value fish in the game, and despite being the game's easiest catch, I really don't recommend them for gaining EXP, since their super low difficulty means they don't grant much experience. They're pretty bad outside of being 100% fumble proof. You can use 4 carp to cook carp surprise, which is too many carp. You would much rather make sashimi 4 times. This is probably the only positive argument for carp. If you're going to turn your fish into sashimi regardless, here's a fish you can literally catch with your eyes closed. Whatever. Sturgeon. These show up come summertime and are quite valuable, if a little tricky to catch. They'd make for good money if they chose to bite more often, but they're somewhat uncommon. Their claim to fame is that sturgeon roe ages into more valuable caviar, which punches way above its weight class, making them a viable money fish for fish ponds. But they still do lag behind blobfish and the legendaries. You need caviar for the missing bundle and to fill a shipping slot on the collection log, so completionists should always set up a sturgeon pond. Midnight carp. A fish only available for a few hours, well, around midnight. They've got a pretty high value among medium difficulty fish, and are one of the ingredients for seafoam pudding, so they'll always have that going for them, even if their late night availability is a bit restrictive. Midnight carp have that flounder issue where their fish pond could produce a usable resource in river jelly, but you need to spend river jelly for their quest, so it's not very good. But now that I'm thinking about it, it wouldn't hurt to have flounder and carp ponds if you wanted a source of reproducing ingredients for cooking seafoam pudding. It's kind of a lot of work, but there is a genuine reason to cook seafoam pudding by the dozen, which I'll talk about very soon since I'm in the mood to move on to the game's 5 legendary fish. Quick summary of the lake fish. Fish good, except for the carp not named Midnight. So, legendary fish. These are the most valuable fish in the game, and their difficulty runs from high to extreme. You're limited to 1 of each legendary fish per save file, until you reach endgame quests and get a shot at Extended Family, which allows you to recatch copies of the original legendary 5. The Extended Family have different names and sprites, and I will talk about them in detail, but I won't be treating them as totally separate fish because they're almost identical and don't even get their own listing on the in-game fish collection tab. Let's open with the big one, the Legend. Worth more than any other fish by a hilarious margin, and it's also got the highest difficulty value. While possible to catch legends on worse fishing setups if you get lucky, you should really bring, at minimum, a trap bobber and some good food, because the legend's movement is extremely erratic and no level of skill can let you keep up 100% of the time. If you personally feel like catching legendary fish is beyond you, even with the best gear, you can try waiting for a random blessing of the waters from the Statue of Blessings, which is part of farming mastery. That'll make it a breeze by massively lowering the fish difficulty. Use a sonar bobber to check which fish is on the line before you hook something, and risk wasting your blessing on a non-legendary fish. You can catch more legends with the Extended Family quest, which lets you bypass the usual seasonal requirements and catch as many copies of legendary fish as you want before you either complete the quest or it expires after 3 days. Fishing for Legend 2s is the highest profit fishing method in the game by far, if you can handle it, which can earn you 500,000 gold worth of smoked legend in 1 day. So what's the setup to make that possible? The hook rate for the legend is quite low at 10%, but the curiosity lure will double that to 20% if you have a second tackle slot handy to fit one in alongside your trap bobber. I don't recommend this method without an advanced iridium rod for both tackle slots. Make sure to use the best food you can get. If there's a time to make cheese seasoned seafoam pudding in bulk to maintain a +5 fishing buff, it's for this moment. Using a quality bobber to get Iridium quality legends would increase your profits by a staggering 33%, but I see the trap bobber and the curiosity lure as irreplaceable for finding the legends and succeeding the minigame. The tough question now is which bait to use. Targeted bait doesn't work nearly as well as it does for more common fish. It will get you more legends, but at a steep cost, since you need to sacrifice some of your legends to make the bait in the first place and there's no guarantee it'll pay off. This method requires you to have a preserving enchanted rod to double the lifetime of your bait. Mathematically, targeted bait is the most profitable choice of bait, but said math falls to pieces the more you fail to catch the legends you hook, wasting your extremely expensive bait without getting a return. You're going to need to be really consistent to go positive and profit a good number of legends. If you're not consistent, you're gonna toss them all into the bait maker and end up with none to keep, since a full day of fishing requires you to sacrifice 5 to 6 legends to the bait maker even with a preserving rod. So what are the other options? I'm actually very partial to deluxe bait for this, because it's really forgiving, and I've made 500k in one day using it. While your rate of hooking legends is much lower, deluxe bait makes fish bite faster than other baits. Getting more fish bites per day helps offset the lower chance of grabbing a legend, and it's not crazy punishing to fail like when using targeted bait. You're also less likely to fail, because deluxe bait slightly widens the fishing bar and any advantage helps when dealing with legends. You can also try using wild bait, which has a low chance to reel in an extra fish. This chance varies with your daily luck, ranging from 7.5 to 17.5, and luck buffs won't help. If your daily luck is very high that day, you've got a decent shot at getting a couple extra legends, which make this pretty viable under good circumstances. Making money off of bulk smoked legend is a fairly advanced method that requires a lot of game progression and is only available during rare occurrences that the quest pops up that week. But you don't need to smoke and sell your legends, since they're also absurdly good in fish ponds. Legends, thanks to their comically high sale value, also have comically valuable aged roe, making legend fish ponds a very steady income, particularly if you double their output with a golden animal cracker, which you should do as soon as you get your hands on one. However, they're not as good as you might think. The roe might be worth miles more than any other fish, so to balance that out, they're not actually very likely to produce roe on any given day. It's a roughly 1 in 5 shot at getting anything, which makes the average income pretty similar to every other legendary fish pond, and not even that far ahead of some non-legendary fish like blobfish. What makes any legendary fish pond a bazillion times better than non-legendary ponds is that they have a max capacity of 1 and have no quests, so they're all set to go at full production capability the moment you toss in a fish. Legendary fish ponds are so good, it's hard to justify doing anything else, particularly since you can catch more legendary fish once you get the quest to do so, and if legends are too hard for you, there are easier options. All legendary fish ponds have various unique pretty colors, and some of the extended family have different colors in their original forms. I'm actually not going to talk about each individual pond any further, because they're all surprisingly really similar in terms of income. The less valuable legendary fish produce roe more often, and frequently produce multiple roe at once to make up for the lower value. I'd say that legends are still the best because they give you fewer, higher value roe, which means you need less jars to process them, which saves you a little space and a little time. I have 4 more legendary fish to talk about. On the other end of the scale we have the angler, which is the easiest legendary fish by far, since it's got the smooth movement pattern and a more approachable difficulty value. There's a good handful of non-legendary fish that are more difficult than anglers. If you've never caught a legendary fish before, give this one a shot, it's not that bad. The bite rate is 20%, which is pretty good for a legendary. The curiosity lure helps a little bit, but makes way less of a difference than some other fish, so you don't really need one. Glacier fish. I have a strong personal hatred for these, mostly because they're deceptively difficult. At a difficulty of 100, that's the second highest of any fish, but still 10 less than the Legends 110. However, and this is a bit unscientific, I've done so much fishing, I have a really finely tuned feel for how big a difference every 10 points in difficulty is, and glaciers feel identical to legends, despite the supposed difference, and it's a very popular opinion online that glacier fish are just as hard or harder than legends. I'd love an explanation for why this is, because they both have the same movement type and should have a big difference. It's almost as if 100 is the max difficulty, and legends aren't harder. Anyway, treat them as seriously as you treat a legend, because they're demons to catch. Otherwise, they've got a lot of advantages. Their bite rate is naturally extremely high and has no interaction with a curiosity lure, If you're on the extended family quest, you can reel these in pretty much constantly if targeted bait, and since you don't need a curiosity lure, your other tackle slot is freed up for a quality bobber, and iridium glaciers sell for a lot of money. During the quest, glaciers are theoretically the second best moneymaker in the game when it comes to fishing, but I don't really recommend it because it's just not fun to spend all day fighting for your life 50 fish in a row. With Legends, you frequently get breaks in between each fish, and volcano lava eels are so much easier and still massively lucrative. The extremely high bite rate makes glacier fish easy to catch in bulk for the purpose of filling up a ton of fish ponds, which is very convenient if you can handle the difficulty. Crimson fish, the second most valuable fish in the game, and a touch easier than glacier fish. I wouldn't say they're a good choice to grind during the extended family quest, because they're just not as valuable as Legends, nor as common as glacier fish. The curiosity lure has moderate value here. Mutant carp, not particularly difficult for a legendary fish, not easy but not that bad. Their bite rate is as rare as the legend, which is fairly annoying, but you can double it with the curiosity lure if you're looking to hunt one down. Anyway, none of the legendary fish are bad. We knew this going in, but I like to dissect everything in detail to satisfy my curiosity and have a better sense of what the full sliding scale of good to bad looks like. The extreme difficulty and limited availability of legendary fish are serious problems, but it's just what you gotta deal with to make a bajillion dollars off these guys, since they have the highest income in the game for fishing, both on the smoked fish and fish pond side of things. Next I'm going to cover a grab bag of fish from weird and obscure areas, starting with the slime jack from the mutant bug lair connected to the sewers. Fish right at the entrance before you get the attention of any bugs, because they will attack you while you're busy. Slime jacks have a sort of medium difficulty and value, but fishing here is really bad since you're likely to get filler crab like algae and carp all the time. Get one slime jack for collection's sake and move on. They have a gimmick of occasionally producing slime in fish ponds, and they also turn the water green. This is pretty unique, but not worth doing since slime doesn't have very many uses unless you're trying to craft 100 oil makers for some reason. I don't like oil makers since they're difficult to make in bulk, and truffle oil is only a small upgrade to iridium quality truffles, which you can guarantee at level 10 foraging. And if you are slime maxing, you're better off of a slime hutch than a fish pond. Void salmon, good value and perfect availability once you have access to the Witch's Swamp, but massively outclassed if you're willing to tackle difficult fish. The logic is simple, if you unlock the swamp you can now also go unlock Ginger Island, and the moment you get there you can do lava eel for 5 times the money. Void salmon could be interesting if they were just available earlier. Their fish pond doesn't make much money, but it sure is purple. Wood skip. These guys come from the secret woods and are nothing special by themselves, but produce a ton of wood-related items in the pond, like hardwood and tree seeds, items that can be hard to get in bulk. I just wish you got the cool stuff a little more often. A lot of people like to plant huge groves of oak trees to tap for making kegs, but at a 5% rate, it's hard to rely on a wood skip to cough up acorns for you. You'd have to put up a ton of wood skip ponds to get bulk tree seeds consistently. But honestly, if your idea of endgame is crafting a ton of mystic saplings for a tree-themed farm, an industrial-sized wood skip facility might be the only way to get the industrial amount of seeds required to craft all of those. So, like, maybe someone would find wood skips to be incredibly useful if their goals are beyond my understanding. Mystic trees genuinely make a lot of money per tree with heavy tappers and accompanying mushroom logs. It's just unreasonable to get a lot of them for normal play, so not many people do that. Sandfish. These Dorito-shaped fish come from the desert oasis, but fishing there isn't great because the water's a bit shallow, and sandfish aren't very rewarding for their difficulty level. They're kind of bad, but you'll want to catch one for the specialty fish bundle. Scorpion carp. These guys are maybe the second most difficult non-legendary fish since they aren't just set to 90 difficulty, they're also dart, which means jerkier, unpredictable movement. A huge pain to catch, without a good enough reward to make doing so worth your time. And again, the shallow water in the oasis can lower the quality level of fish and make you even less money for your effort. Scorpion carp kinda suck, and we should all collectively protest Willy for asking us to catch one during the desert festival. The desert fish are definitely the worst of this group. We're also almost out of groups, but there are 3 fish unique to Ginger Island to talk about. Lionfish. These would be fantastic if you could catch them before needing to reach Ginger Island. 100 gold is a very good value for a fish that's so buttery smooth and easy the perfect catch, and they're not only extremely common, they're basically guaranteed if targeted bait. If you don't have level 10 fishing yet and you're at Ginger Island, train on lionfish. They have perfect availability and will rack up experience incredibly quickly while making a respectable income on the side. Blue Discus. Nothing special at first glance, but I've actually used these for their unique fish pond loot, specifically bananas. You need 13 bananas to reach perfection, and with a golden animal cracker, this is a viable alternative to planting a banana sapling if you haven't found one, and those saplings are pretty hard to get your hands on. Stingray. These are popular because their fish pond has a rare chance of coughing up a dragon tooth, which you want 10 of for the very useful island obelisk, and 5 more to make a mini forge if you're going for 100% perfection. Dragon teeth are much quicker to gather by doing regular volcano runs to search for them, but this method is passive and will get there eventually without going through all the effort. Keep in mind, it is really slow with only one stingray pond, since the rate of teeth is so poor, so you might want to set up a couple ponds. That being said, it's not the only useful thing they give you, since the more common battery packs are quite useful for making iridium sprinklers and crystallariums. I'm finally done with rod fish, but not all fish, because 10 fish are tied to crab pots. A bunch of these can be found as beach forage, but they don't appear in your fishing collection unless you trap them yourself. Before covering each crab pot fish, it's important to talk about how crab potting is different from rod fishing, because it's severely disadvantaged across multiple fronts. First, there's a high barrier to entry. Each pot is surprisingly quite expensive in terms of crafting materials or in cost to purchase from Willy. If you want to set out 50 pots, that's actually quite a large investment. Crab pots are also very unrewarding for making money, because the average value of a crab pot is only 75 gold. Unlike rod fishing, they're always low quality. And that's if you get a fish, because crab pots love to spit out trash 38% of the time instead. And before you let anyone try to convince you that isn't a bad thing because you can put trash into a recycling machine, crafting a ton of recycling machines is an additional resource burden on top of the already expensive pots, and the stuff you usually get isn't even very good. Ultimately, it's going to take like a full month for that crab pot to make your money back. To make crab potting worth it, you instead need to find alternate uses for your catch, like cooking, because you're not going to get rich by selling clams and snails. All of those cheap shellfish like oysters and mussels sell for very little gold, but can still be used to cook sashimi, which restores a good chunk of health and energy, is easy to make in large batches, and if you have way too much of it, selling your sashimi is still better than selling low quality oysters. I highly suspect cooking is the main goal for using crab pots, because 8 of the 10 crab pot fish are also used in ingredients in specific recipes, beyond the all fish recipes like sashimi. This makes the mariner profession for crab potting a bit more enticing, as you'd get far more fish to cook with, and if you're cooking the fish anyway, skipping out on angler isn't as crippling as it otherwise would be, given that angler does make your raw catch far more valuable and not having it kinda sucks. Speaking of professions, if you plan to use crab pots as an alternative to rod fishing for training the skill, you'd struggle to reach level 10, because you only get 5 experience per pot. In comparison, perfect catching 1 bullhead, a very easy task, is worth 57 experience. If you start at level 0, set out an unrealistic 100 crab pots, and ran them every single day for a month, you still wouldn't reach level 10 fishing. Their experience rate is terrible compared to rod fishing. That's why I really dislike the idea of specializing in crab pots with the potting professions. You already have to work hard to extract value out of crab pots, and struggling to earn the professions in the first place is its own punishment. You can actually use different kinds of bait in crab pots for a different result, but this is likely going to lose you money. Deluxe bait slightly reduces the rate of trash and raises the quality of your catch to silver. You'll get more fish and they'll sell for a little bit more gold, but deluxe bait is much more expensive than what you're getting out of it, running at a severe loss if you were to buy the deluxe bait from Willy. And the stuff is hard to craft yourself in bulk since moss is a fairly limited resource. Save the stuff for the fishing rod. Wild bait gives you a 25% chance to get double loot from pots, which would get you more fish to cook with, but I still don't think it's worth spending time and materials trying to craft hundreds of wild bait just to rapidly burn them away filling up crab pots. Targeted bait is a little janky. If you have the mariner profession, all fish have the same rarity and the bait won't do anything. If you have any other profession, targeted bait will make your fish more common, but it rarely makes a big enough difference to be worth the trade-off. You'd go positive using targeted bait on already common fish, but spending a lobster to make targeted bait to get maybe 1 extra lobster leaves you with 0 extra lobsters. It's kind of a waste of time on anything except maybe crabs, where they're normally kind of rare, one of the better crab pot fish, and the difference is large enough to make you consider doing this. Crab pot fish share the same type of fish pond where they almost always spit up various trash instead of anything useful, and the only thing I can think to do with these is that they're one of the few ways to sneak in a Nautilus shell for the field research bundle prior to winter. At a 2% rate, good luck getting one. Well, I said many things that make crab pots sound terrible, so let's cover every fish and discuss their unique cooking utility that just might make gathering from them a worthwhile and engaging task. First up, crabs. They named the pots after these. Good value for a crab pot fish, but too rare to be lucrative when using normal bait. What crabs are good for are for cooking crab cakes, a wonderful food that increases your walk speed for an entire day. Walking around faster lets you do more things, whether it's running chores, mining, planting, anything. And crab cakes are very convenient because you can eat one in the morning and just forget about it. Now you don't need to cook your own speed boosting food. There are lots of other ways to get your hands on some. Whether you trade rubies to the desert merchant for spicy eel, or slay iridium crabs for their common crab cake drops. But crabs absolutely have their place in the world of cooking. Lobsters. The highest value crab pot fish, but very rare. Obnoxiously so, even. But if you recall when I covered the concept of fishing boosting food, you'll remember that I really like lobster bisque. Lobster bisque is a simple, easy to cook recipe that applies a substantial fishing boost for a very long duration, standing miles ahead of food with shorter buff timers. The hard part is getting the lobsters, but I highly recommend cooking this recipe if you're the kind of person who wants to fish lava eel or legendary fish all day. Lobster is also a loved gift option for Elliot, which could come in handy, although I personally lean towards pomegranates for bulk gifting, and duck feathers for a high quality option. Clams. Unimpressive value and used to cook chowder, which is sort of like a weak version of lobster bisque. The buff lasts a very long time but isn't very potent. Chowder does restore a lot of energy and health for an easy, simple recipe, but you have to compare it to other uses for your milk, like cheese making, because gold star cheeses made from large milks restore exactly as much energy as chowder, sell for far more money, and you don't even need a clam. I don't see myself doing this, but maybe people are using their low quality milk on hand and cooking up chowder for heavy duty energy restoration before heading out to fish. Cockle. An unfortunately named mollusk that isn't very useful. Unlike most crab pot catches, it doesn't have any unique recipes, nor is it worth much money. It's honestly pretty bad. Mussel. Has the lowest value among the oceanic crab pot shellfish, but that doesn't mean it's useless, because you can use them to cook fish stew, a recipe I highly recommend as an equivalent to lobster bisque that's arguably easier to cook since you don't need to contend with the rarity of lobsters, given that mussels are pretty much free once you reach Ginger Island, and the other ingredients are super common. That being said, since mussels are so common from other sources like beach foraging and mussel rocks, you really don't need to catch them using crab pots. Shrimp. They have two recipes, but I don't know if there's a real practical use case for either of them. Tom Kha soup is a loved gift for Elliot and Penny, but I find it so much easier to give Penny some of her 8 other options, like emeralds or poppy. And the unlock requirement for the recipe is a little annoying, since Sandy is out of the way and available later than other villagers. Shrimp cocktails I find a bit underwhelming and outclassed by other buff food, and it's one of the latest recipe unlocks in the game. They make you wait 2 years for something I already don't want to cook. Good thing you can get the recipe early once you unlock the cookbook purchase. I'm not a huge fan of shrimp, but at least it has something interesting going on. Oyster. These do not have anything interesting going on. In fact, they're basically worse cockles, because they don't have a recipe and are worth less gold, making them easily the worst crab pot fish. This one's going to join the bad fish bucket without a second glance. Moving on to freshwater crab pots, we have way fewer fish and they're all very common compared to anything from the ocean. Crayfish, the most valuable of the freshwater catch. These get a thumbs up because they're used to make fish stew. Periwinkle, hilariously low value, like these are basically dirt. But since they're the final component of the fish stew recipe, I may as well be fair and give them the same thumbs up I granted mussels and crayfish. Snail, I think snails are pretty cute. Escargot is a perfectly usable recipe, with similar traits to bisque and fish stew with the heavy energy restoration and long-lasting fishing buff. It's just that the boost is a little less potent, but at least it's reasonably easy to cook these in bulk given how common snails are and how cheap garlic seeds are. The main problem is that you can't buy garlic seeds until year 2, which is kind of a bummer. With the crab pots done, surely I've covered all the fish, right? That's all of them? How many was that, 66? Why does the fishing collection have 72 slots? The final category of fish I'm calling not really fish. but they're part of the fishing collection, and you can catch them with your rod. So I'll talk about them, but I want to be clear that they aren't fish, can't be used to cook fish recipes like sashimi, and can't be thrown into fish ponds either. Green algae. These are more or less filler trash items that are much worse than actually hooking a fish. Their primary use is in the construction of fish ponds, which makes them quite nice to have around. You can cook algae soup with any spares to mildly upgrade the value of your algae, but once again, it really would have been nicer had you just caught fish instead. White algae. When cooked into pale broth, these do restore a respectable amount of energy, but you can generally only fish up white algae in weak fishing zones like the sewers or floor 20 of the mines, and catching a white algae does still make me raise my hand and ask if it would have been nicer to just catch a fish instead. Seaweed, the green algae of the sea, and mostly used in the construction of fish ponds. As for cooking, I really don't think that maki roll is a good recipe because rice isn't cheap. River jelly. All types of jellies are very rare, but have a high enough sale value and energy restoration to where it's okay to hook one of these instead of a fish, but the real value comes in the crafting of fish smokers to double the sale price of your valuable fish. Sea jelly notably sells for more than the other jellies and restores more energy, and it's even got a fishing buff, making it a great fishing snack if you're not jealously hoarding every single one you find to make smokers with. Cave jelly. These are interesting. They're far more common on floor 100 of the mines than floors 20 or 60, so make sure to go there to hunt them down. Since eating cave jelly grants a luck buff, I'll talk about how luck buffs massively increase the rate at which you find jelly. Normally, 1 extra point of luck means you're 50% more likely to hook a jelly, but the effect of luck is dramatically more potent on floor 100 of the mines, where a single point of luck will double your odds. More luck will make a bigger difference, so if you eat a lucky lunch for a +3 boost, you can expect considerably more jellies. How far can you take this anyway? Food and drink buffs stack separately, so you can sip on ginger ale for more luck, you could wear 2 lucky rings for more, and you could even eat a magic rock candy for a +5 boost, bigger than lucky lunch. The results are pretty staggering. You can make a really big batch of jello with these. That's everything on the fishing collection covered. I hope y'all are taking notes because there will be a quiz. Jokes aside, I need to reach into the bucket and scoop up all the candidates for worst fish and see if I can come up with a winner. Loser. Whatever. The fish I complained about the most were sunfish, dorado, lingcod, anchovy, octopus, carp, scorpion carp, and oyster. That's a lot of fish, but I think I can trim this list down quickly because several of these fish share similar complaints. If the worst fish is going to be one of the extremely low-value trash fish, that group will include sunfish, anchovy, and carp, which I all singled out from the river, beach, and mountains respectively for being nearly valueless at a shared price tag of 30 gold. It's a simple decision to discard sunfish and carp here, because I think anchovies are the worst in this group, mostly because they're a dart fish, meaning that their jerky movement pattern makes them harder to perfect catch at very low fishing levels, while sunfish and carp are better tutorial fish for beginning level training to earn experience and get your fishing level out of the gutter so you can upgrade gear and enjoy a wider fishing bar. I only end up fishing the beach in spring and catching some anchovies in my challenge runs because my real goal, specifically on the morning of day 2, is to camp out on Willie's doorstep and buy a fiberglass rod as soon as possible before running away to greener shores like the mountains. Anchovies are still in the running for worst fish, but what about the others? Dorado, lingcod, octopus, and scorpion carp all share the same problem where they have a terrible value to difficulty ratio, and it's not worth going for the effort to catch them. Imagine 2 fish with the same value, but sharply different difficulty. I'll use dorado and largemouth bass as my example. You'd prefer to catch the easier fish, and this isn't just about convenience. The low difficulty fish in practice is actually more valuable. Largemouth bass aren't too hard to perfect catch, and perfect catches boost quality levels. Iridium fish are worth 33% more gold than gold star fish. Those perfect catches also mean you're going to earn vastly more experience from the easier fish. The problems of overly difficult fish don't end there. If the fish escapes the line, you're earning 0 gold for your effort. If you need to use a trap bobber to consistently catch a difficult fish, you're spending extra money and effort on them, and that's 1 less tackle slot that could have been used on something else. So of these 4 fish that are just way too hard for how much money they're worth, which one do I hate the most? I'll turn to my other fish traits to narrow it down. I'm already considering difficulty and value, But what about availability and rarity? Octopus are unusually hard to track down. They only appear in summer mornings until you reach Ginger Island, and they're the rarest fish in the sea when they are supposedly around. Trying to catch octopus on purpose is exhausting. They're not only the most difficult non-legendary fish, even using targeted bait is still inconsistent. Those challenges combined with their extreme difficulty means that despite a reasonably good value of 150 gold, trying to hunt these down in bulk for profit fishing is a fool's errand. They become marginally more common on Ginger Island, but at that point, for the love of God, please go to the volcano and do lava eel instead. Dorado are almost as rare as octopus, but I don't think they're in the running. They stay around 6 hours longer than octopus, and while I think they're still a terrible fish heavily outclassed in summer, they're not as extreme or problematic as the others, since I don't even need a trap bobber to deal with them. The more I think about it, I could waffle on about lingcod and scorpion carp, but it seems quite clear in my head that octopus is the worst out of this group of 4, and amplifies all of the complaints to the highest degree. So we're going to keep octopus in the running for worst fish. Oyster is in sort of its own category here, since it's representing the worst of the crab pot fish, which feels quite separate to the usual rod fishing. Oysters are hard to compare head to head with the rod fish, since entire concepts like difficulty don't apply. Instead, the greater problems of crab pots are what come to mind. The surprisingly expensive initial cost to set up pots, and the dirt poor return on shellfish like oysters, making those pots take a month to break even. Plus, I can't overstate just how terrible the experience gains are for running crab pots. You can get up to 45 experience off of an anchovy, but 5 experience for a crab pot. That has to be a factor, right? I'm thinking that all of these fish are terrible in such different ways that it's tricky to choose which one to crown as the worst fish, since direct comparisons are hard when in many ways they're complete opposites. If they all have different problems, then maybe the question to ask is, which of these fish has the most extreme problems? I identified anchovies as the ambassador of the low-value trash fish, but it's honestly barely different from several other fish, and doesn't really stand out as a compelling choice to isolate as the worst fish of the game. I mean, it's almost completely identical to the herring. It's bad in an inoffensive, forgettable way that just inconveniences you slightly, in the same banal fashion of several other fish. I can't see myself picking this one. The anchovy is basically the equivalent of getting a tiny pebble stuck in your shoe. It's not the end of the world. I'm taking anchovy out of the running. That leaves oyster and octopus. I have extensive gripes when it comes to the process of using crab pots, but is it appropriate to saddle oysters with that burden? Do oysters really stand out as uniquely terrible, or am I just the crab pot's biggest hater? Oysters are essentially nothing, a valueless gray blob made worse by the startup investment involved in crab pots. But I might be the only person taking this fight. Oysters are a complete background element in the minds of the average Stardew player. You can even get one for the crab pot bundle by just finding it on the beach, no effort required. I feel like I had to do extensive writing and research to even arrive at oysters as a possibility for the worst fish. And now that I'm standing here in a western cowboy standoff against a mollusk you could mistake for a rock, I don't have the courage to draw. I don't know if I can muster a compelling argument to single out oysters specifically that will convince everyone else that it's the king of crap. I think they're bad. I think they might be terrible. But I also think oysters are a background character that don't have enough of an impact in any capacity to where anyone else has ever thought about them as hard as I have in these past moments. I'm going to let this go. And that leaves octopus. I hate this stupid mug. Yeah, that's right, the rest of the fish are out of the running and you are the worst. Wanna hook one? Nope. Want to catch one? Not happening. How's it stack up? The other hard fish are easier to catch, easier to find, and worth more money. Oh, it's a gift for Willy. Give him a sea cucumber. The only thing you'll find if you Google octopus are people begging for mercy. All this fish does is troll people not expecting it, or evade people who desperately need one for completing the fish collection. That's it. That's the worst fish. This video is my master's thesis on fish science, and it's been over an hour and I am done. Subscribe to my channel for more nonsense like this. Cheers.